live broadcast starts quietly and ends up sending shockwaves through an entire community, you know something big just happened. That's exactly what unfolded when David Schwartz, the Chief Technology Officer at Ripple, spoke openly about XRP's future. Viewers expected another technical Q&A session. What they got instead were statements that sounded less like routine updates and more like a window into the next era of global finance. Within hours, clips from that talk were circulating across social media with headlines like "He leaked it live" and "The truth about XRP finally exposed." Because for the first time in years, a Ripple executive didn't just hint at what's coming, he spelled it out. And if you understood what he was saying between the lines, you realize that XRP's role in the global financial system may be far bigger than anyone imagined. This is Crypto Equation, and today we're unpacking exactly what David Schwartz revealed, why it matters, and how it could reshape the future of money. Schwartz began by addressing a topic most investors barely think about, the plumbing of value transfer. He said, "The XRP ledger was never meant to be just a payment network. It's designed to be a universal layer for tokenized assets." In one sentence, he reframed what XRP actually is. It's not simply a coin that moves between exchanges. It's a programmable settlement engine capable of handling everything from central bank digital currencies to tokenized treasuries. Then came the line that made the community explode. Liquidity Hub isn't a side project. It's the connective tissue between traditional finance and digital liquidity. In other words, Ripple is quietly building the rails that allow banks, fintechs, and even governments to tap crypto markets in real time without ever touching an exchange interface. That statement might sound technical, but its implications are enormous. It means XRP's infrastructure is evolving into the invisible bridge of the new financial internet, exactly the role many thought was still years away. Schwartz moved on to what he called the next wave of ledger evolution, the automated market maker integration. He explained that every payment network needs liquidity, and AMMs are how you make that liquidity constant. The XRP ledger's new AMM feature allows liquidity pools to rebalance automatically, reducing slippage and stabilizing exchange rates between currencies. Schwartz described it as a self-healing liquidity layer. To insiders, that phrase was a thunderbolt. It means XRP can now operate as a live market that balances itself, exactly what large financial institutions require before they trust a blockchain for real settlements. He added another layer, the Hooks Amendment, a system that lets developers program custom logic directly into the ledger. That's Ripple's answer to smart contracts, but without the heavy code and security risks that plague other chains. Hooks let banks, remittance companies, or even governments embed compliance, reporting, and automation directly into transactions. So instead of rewriting core banking software, institutions can plug into a ready-made global ledger that already speaks their regulatory language. For those who have followed Ripple for years, this was the clearest confirmation yet that XRP is becoming infrastructure, not speculation. At one point, the interviewer asked, "So is Ripple still focused only on cross-border payments?" Schwartz smiled and said, "Cross-border is just the start. Once value can move freely, everything else, loans, securities, real estate, will follow." That sentence was like flipping a switch. He was effectively saying that XRP's mission extends to tokenized assets and real-world finance. And that dovetails perfectly with what we're seeing globally. Trillions in bonds, funds, and commodities now being tested on blockchain rails. He continued, "The ledger doesn't care if the token represents dollars or carbon credits. It only cares about speed, cost, and finality." In those few words, Schwartz summed up why regulators and banks are slowly warming to Ripple's tech. It doesn't try to overthrow the system, it improves it. That's the subtle but powerful distinction that could make XRP the first digital asset widely adopted by institutions. As the conversation went on, Schwartz addressed the ISO 2022 migration head-on. He confirmed that Ripple's systems have been compliant for years, and that most US and global banks will complete their transition by 2025. He added, "When everyone speaks the same data language, interoperability becomes natural. You won't even think about which network you're on." That's a quiet but revolutionary statement. If Ripple's rails merge seamlessly with banking standards, banks can settle across borders through XRP without even labeling it crypto. It just becomes the network. He also revealed that Ripple has been working with multiple central banks on CBDC pilots that use variations of the XRP ledger. He didn't name which ones, but mentioned regions already public: Bhutan, Palau, the Middle East. Then he said something that sent analysts scrambling. Every central bank exploring digital currency eventually faces the same challenge: interoperability. We already solved that. That line alone felt like a leak because it hinted that Ripple's tech could become the default bridge between otherwise incompatible CBDC systems. Imagine dozens of national currencies settling through one neutral layer. That's XRP's blueprint, and hearing the CTO confirm that solution publicly was the moment many realized how far Ripple has come. Schwartz didn't stop there. He dove into regulation, acknowledging how painful the SEC case had been, but also why it was crucial. Clarity unlocks adoption, he said. Since the 2023 ruling that XRP itself isn't a security in secondary markets, institutional interest has surged. He explained that compliance departments now have something solid to reference, which shortens integration timelines dramatically. For the first time, banks can experiment without fear of violating securities law. He also dropped an intriguing comment about US partnerships. Most of our domestic growth right now is through intermediaries that already have licenses. That means Ripple is expanding indirectly through payment providers, money service businesses, and fintech platforms that plug into RippleNet while the larger banks prepare their own integrations. It's a stealthy rollout, quiet, regulatory first, and exactly how global infrastructure replaces old systems without drama. The host asked him about Ripple's liquidity hub, and Schwartz leaned forward. It's the connective tissue, he repeated. He explained that Liquidity Hub isn't just for XRP, it's for any asset that moves through Ripple's rails. But XRP sits at the center because it's the only bridge asset capable of providing instant settlement across both fiat and digital markets. Liquidity Hub routes value the way the internet routes data. Fastest path, lowest cost. And the more corridors it connects, the more XRP volume flows automatically. He mentioned that RippleNet transactions had already reached record throughput, and that the company was experimenting with multi-hop settlements, payments that jump across multiple currencies using XRP as the bridge. Each hop compounds demand for liquidity. Each integration pushes XRP closer to becoming an invisible layer of global finance. For investors listening, it felt like a masterclass disguised as a casual conversation. Schwartz was giving away the roadmap without ever using investor language. He spoke as an engineer, but every phrase carried financial weight. When he said, "Once value moves freely, everything else follows," he was describing the same cascade effect we've seen with the internet, cloud computing, and now tokenized assets. And the more he talked, the more obvious it became. The so-called secrets weren't conspiracy theories. They were open facts hidden in plain sight because few people understood their significance. Schwartz then shifted the conversation to what he called the real economy of blockchain. He said the next phase isn't about speculation but integration. For years, crypto projects chased price. Ripple instead chased utility. He admitted that was the slower path, but argued it's the only one that lasts. Real adoption happens when people stop realizing they're using blockchain, he said. That's exactly what's starting to unfold right now. Every week, new corridors are coming online. Payments that once moved through SWIFT now clear in seconds on RippleNet. Treasury desks that once pre-funded accounts overseas are beginning to rely on XRP-based liquidity instead. The system is shifting quietly, transaction by transaction, until one day it will simply be the standard. And the reason that's happening isn't hype. It's because the math makes sense. Ripple's rails save banks 60 to 70% on settlement costs and free up billions in working capital. That kind of efficiency isn't optional, it's inevitable. When a technology saves money and meets compliance, adoption is just a matter of time. The interviewer asked how far this vision really goes. Schwartz smiled again and said, "If you look at how tokenization is evolving, every financial asset you can imagine will have a digital twin. Those twins need a neutral layer to move across jurisdictions. That's where XRP fits." He wasn't describing a niche coin. He was describing the connective fabric of the next financial system. He pointed out that tokenized treasuries, stablecoins, carbon credits, and CBDCs all share one requirement: instant settlement with finality. That's exactly what the XRP ledger delivers. He added, "People talk about interoperability as if it's optional. It's not. It's the foundation." That statement landed like a quiet revelation. Interoperability isn't a feature of Ripple's tech. It is the reason it exists. Then came the part that many watchers called the moment of exposure. Schwartz talked about a prototype Ripple has been testing internally, an interledger routing engine capable of moving value between private CBDC networks and public blockchains simultaneously. He didn't show diagrams or slides, just said, "We've demonstrated transfers between closed central bank ledgers and open networks using the same protocol stack." The audience went silent. It was the confirmation many suspected, but had never heard publicly. Ripple's technology can already talk to the very systems global banks are building behind closed doors. That single remark reframed XRP's future. It's not competing with central banks, it's connecting them. When those private networks go live, they'll need a neutral bridge asset to provide liquidity. Schwartz never said the words outright, but everyone knew what he meant, that bridge is XRP. He was asked if Ripple planned to go public. He didn't confirm or deny, only said, Ripple is structured to scale like any other financial network. The focus right now is interoperability, not headlines. But the subtext was clear. An IPO would inject capital, visibility, and legitimacy into the brand and likely draw a new wave of institutional attention to XRP itself. He closed the session by returning to a theme that defines his entire philosophy: transparency. Technology should make systems more transparent, not less, he said. That was a subtle response to critics who claim Ripple is too centralized. He explained that decentralization isn't about chaos, it's about resilience, and XRP's ledger has been running without downtime since 2012. Few blockchains on Earth can make that claim. When the livestream ended, social media erupted. Clips of Schwartz's statements flooded X and YouTube under titles like Major XRP Secrets Exposed Live. But the real secret wasn't a hidden file or confidential deal. It was the realization that Ripple's strategy is already years ahead of public perception. Most investors still think of XRP as a coin waiting for adoption. In reality, adoption has been happening quietly under everyone's noses. Banks are modernizing to ISO 2022. CBDCs are converging on the same messaging formats. Liquidity Hub is onboarding corporate clients. And the XRP ledger is evolving into a programmable, self-balancing settlement layer. Every one of those steps was confirmed, in plain English, by the man who designed the system. That's why the community called it a leak. Not because he broke confidentiality, but because he finally connected the dots out loud. The implications are enormous. If Ripple's technology becomes the standard bridge for digital assets, the daily transaction volume funneled through XRP could multiply by orders of magnitude. And remember what happens in any network when usage spikes. Liquidity demand drives price discovery. That doesn't mean instant wealth or guaranteed returns. It means XRP could finally be valued for what it does, not just for what people hope it might do. Schwartz's revelations show that the pieces are already in motion. The regulatory clarity from the SEC ruling, the infrastructure upgrades like AMMs and hooks, the global partnerships that quietly expand RippleNet, and the macro tailwinds of tokenization and interest rate cuts that analysts like Tom Lee keep pointing to. When those forces converge, markets tend to reprice fast. What should investors take from all this? First, that the era of waiting for permission is over. Ripple isn't waiting, it's integrating. Second, that hype will always fade, but utility compounds. Every new corridor, every CBDC pilot, every liquidity hub integration adds another layer of permanence to XRP's role in global finance. And third, that information moves markets long before numbers do. Those who actually listen to what executives like David Schwartz are saying, not rumor channels, but real statements, will see the shift before the headlines catch up. Imagine a few years from now, a world where banks, fintechs, and governments settle billions every day through Ripple's network, where retail investors hardly notice that their international transfers clear via the same ledger that central banks use, where the word crypto disappears, and what remains is just money, faster, cheaper, universal. That's the world Schwartz hinted at when he said, once value moves freely, everything else follows. He wasn't predicting hype, he was describing inevitability. So when people say he leaked major XRP secrets live, remember what really happened. A leading technologist told the truth about a system that's already working. He didn't expose Ripple, he exposed how close we are to a financial world that finally functions at the speed of the internet. The secret isn't in a file or a courtroom document, the secret is comprehension, understanding what those public words actually mean. Because while most investors were waiting for headlines, the architecture of the new financial system was being built right in front of them. And now, for those paying attention, the blueprint is clear. If this gave you insight, subscribe to Crypto Equation, where we uncover the data, logic, and technology driving the next financial revolution. Comment below. What part of David Schwartz's revelation surprised you most? And how soon do you think banks will quietly start using XRP behind the scenes? Whatever your answer, remember, knowledge always moves faster than money, and those who understand early are the ones who benefit most. This is Crypto Equation, and I'll see you in the next one.